Why don't we start with Andrew, I'm still calling him Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Jeffrey Epstein appears to have confirmed that photo that you and the then Prince Andrew discussed was indeed real and was taken. It wasn't a fake.
If these emails are true.
Correct, yeah.
If they're correct. And I say that because everything we know about Epstein is that he was not only a prolific paedophile, but he was a prolific liar. So you have to take everything with a pinch of salt that you read in here. But Epstein says, of the picture that Andrew took with Virginia Giuffre, where he had his hand round her waist, yes, she was on my plane. Yes, she had her picture taken with Andrew, as many of my employees do. Why does that matter? Because this was a central tenet of Prince Andrew's testimony to me during that interview. He said it couldn't have been him. He'd never been upstairs in Gulen's house in Belgravia. He wouldn't have worn sort of civilian clothes for a night out in London. And he didn't think that the hand was his. And I remember sort of probing him on this and not really understanding his response because there were so many bits of kind of explanation to it. I said, well, are you calling it a fake or is that you? He said, no, it's definitely me. And I said, well, which bit of it do you not believe? And he said, well, I'm not sure the hand and I'm not sure I went upstairs. And so he was sort of wriggling through this whole episode, trying to make out that the photo itself was fake or was not him. And in fact, before the interview, he'd sent us off to try and prove that the photo had been a fake. Now, Epstein seems to clarify that, yes, it was Virginia Giuffre's photograph and it was not an unusual thing for he calls them employees. I mean, trafficked women, trafficked girls. It would be how many of us see that. But yeah, he sort of throws that out. And I should say, Sheila, that, you know, it is kind of needle in a haystack time at the moment because there are 23,000 emails in this new dump. It's a bit like when WikiLeaks sort of broke and we just didn't know where to start, quite frankly. And so there is every chance that the stuff that I tell you now will be overtaken by the stuff that we find as we go through more stuff over the days and weeks to come. Yeah.
What's from the ones I've managed to read since yesterday, Epstein in particular is such a horse trader, isn't he?
Right.
It's all horse trading, whether it's with journalists, whether it's with other kinds of associates. It's all about what I can get out of this and what you can get out of this.
I mean, horse trader is a nice way of putting it.
Yes,
there is a lot of stuff that looks like potential blackmail in here. And again, we have to go back to how Epstein presents himself, which is constantly as the insider, the wheeler dealer who has all the dirt on everyone else. So there is suggestion in these emails that he wanted to leverage his friendship with Trump to store up material that might be used as compromat. And it's quite interesting because this is much later.
Yeah.
The stuff that he's talking about happens long after Trump told us their friendship ended. So a lot of these emails talk about sort of 2015, 2016. In one email, he suggests even that he was about to spend Thanksgiving with Trump in 2017, when it would have been President Trump. It would have been his first Thanksgiving in the White House. Now, we don't have a response to that from Trump, but
that's presumably checkable, is it? Or
it is. I mean, that's where we're going next. You know, we're going to see exactly where Trump was because there will be people in his orbit and to take record. But it's quite interesting that as he's fighting this election in 2015, Epstein asks a New York Times reporter, "Would you like photos of Donald and girls in bikinis in my kitchen?" We don't know if those photos exist. There is no proof that.
And girls could mean women because of the way some people speak.
But I mean, there is no sense in any of this of criminal wrongdoing. But what there is a link that Donald Trump was in Epstein's house. If what he's saying in the emails is verifiable.
It's similar to that email that emerged a few weeks ago in which Andrew had emailed Epstein, beyond the time he told you he'd finished all contact.
Yeah, except I'd say in that case, it definitely came from Andrew. So it connects Andrew to Epstein. This is just
third parties.
It's just what Epstein is saying about his relationship with Trump. We haven't had that response from Trump.
Yes, yeah.
But he also says, for example, Trump, this is part of the same tranche. Trump was so focused on watching girls in my swimming pool that he bumped into a glass door. He left a nose print, he says, on the glass. Again, that doesn't infer criminal behaviour, but it does tell us that Epstein remembers a time or writes about a time that Trump was very much in his house. And what is interesting is that he also talks about going to Trump Towers in November of 2016. 13th of November 2016 would be a week after Trump won the election. So that is where, as journalists, we're heading our investigations now. We want to know, did the friendship carry on
well into his first time in office?
Well into that first term in office, because Trump told us that he broke things off with Epstein in 2004-05.
And he was in a conversation as well with Steve Bannon, wasn't he? And that seemed to be over sort of some kind of political leverage he could give him in Europe, or contacts he could give him in Europe.
I mean, that went on quite late. I've met Steve Bannon several times. I've talked to him quite intently about, his what he was trying to do in Europe. You'll remember that Steve Bannon wanted to kind of globalise the MAGA movement. One of the things he wanted to do was buy a monastery in Italy
and turn it into
Christianise European politics. Exactly. He wants to bring and Steve Bannon spent a lot of time alongside Marine Le Pen. In France at the sort of far-right rallies there. And he's been in Italy trying to buy this monastery to sort of set up a sort of almost like an Italian MAGA Christian school there. And it sounds from those emails that Epstein was saying, you need to be on the ground, you need to be working, in Europe, you need to have your feet on the table.
Has to be face-to-face there,
I mean, what we're learning is just the scale and scope of this web of men around Epstein. Whether it's Bannon, whether it's Larry Summers at Harvard, whether it's Trump, whether it's, the people that he cites that were on the island, that were part of his entourage. Again, there is no implication yet of criminal behaviour from any of the stuff we've seen. But I keep going back to this, Sheila. When we talk about Andrew, or when we talk about titles, or when we talk about the Royal Lodge or Sandringham, it is the tip of the iceberg, right? And what this is starting to show us is just how much more we need to learn about Epstein's crimes.
And I couldn't help but notice the line about Ascot, essentially don't worry, we can go to Ascot forever, we'll never be in.
Yeah, but don't forget where that came. That came at the end of an email saying, if we can rubbish Virginia Giuffre, if we can make out that she's a liar,
we'll still be good for Ascot.
And it was a proper weapon, that, to take these young, vulnerable women who'd had very difficult pasts. Many of them had had abuse in their past before. Many of them were earning money because it was the only way that they were surviving. And all that had to happen was for you to take their reputations and just wring them out, rip them in half.
And people stop listening.
And people start thinking, oh, well, these girls would say that, wouldn't they?
I've had calls already this hour from one gentleman saying, oh, come on, they're not victims. They were earning a bit of money. They knew what they were doing. And, we had a conversation then about what grooming does to people and la, la, la.
Well, but on the newsagents, just now, on our podcast, which drops at 5 o'clock on Global Player, I was speaking to Spencer Couvin, who is the US attorney who brought victim one.
Yeah, we had him on earlier as well.
Exactly.
He's probably sick of us by now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the stuff he's talking about now is how important it is to listen to these women, to listen to these young women, because the moment you start saying, oh, well, don't bring us your thing, oh, it's too much effort to go
too long ago. Yeah.
You let it all happen again.
And on the politics of this now, it's all politics really, isn't it? As much as all the other things it is. Donald Trump pushing back as we expected, saying it's all a hoax, it's all about the Dems. But he can't wish this away, can he?
Well, something very significant has happened now, which is that they've had the 218th vote on this petition to release the Epstein files.
The stuff you mentioned yesterday.
Exactly. It was only allowed because government in the US has now opened up. They swore in the last Democratic Congresswoman. In her maiden speech about 9:20 last night, she said, now it's time for justice. In other words, let's push ahead with getting these Epstein files released. So, dare I say, without scaring off your listeners forever, the 23,000 emails is only the beginning. And the rest of the Epstein files could be released by December.
One of the questions I've asked callers today is, do you care? Because obviously it's important that I talk about things that people care about when I'm talking to them. But an awful lot of people do care. They very much care. Some people only hear it as an assault on Trump. What would you say to the question, why should I care?
Well, one of the most interesting things about this is how many Republicans are calling for the release of the Epstein files. So the actual petition was brought by one Republican, Thomas Massie, and a Democrat, Ro Khanna. It's one of the few cross-party petitions, cross-party pieces of work that we've seen in America for a long time. Point, yeah. So, no, this is not coming solely from Democrats. And if I wanted to give you examples, real sort of heartland MAGA voices, like Marjorie Taylor Greene we spoke about yesterday, like Lauren Boebert, like Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace is standing to be the governor of South Carolina. She has everything to lose from crossing Trump, because he could withdraw his support from her and say, don't want anything to do with you, or rubbish her. And she has kept her name on this list. Marjorie Taylor Greene is pushing for it. Lauren Boebert was pulled into the Situation Room, we understand, at the White House. And Trump and his acolytes were trying to make her change their mind. And I think this is opening up a really interesting space, which is if there are MAGA voices now that care more about getting to the truth on Epstein, because frankly, their voters, their constituents care more about this, then Trump is starting to lose his grip on the sort of shape of MAGA.
Which has been total, hasn't it?
Right.
And you think it could start to dismantle?
I think we'll see. I mean, I don't think it means that they're all going to become Democrats overnight, but they might be saying, Trump is tarnished, who's the next voice? You know, who's the J.D. Vance, who's the younger person? Who's the person that's going to take us into the next tranche of MAGA, because he is too tied in. Now, I don't want to over-speak at this point, but it is interesting that he's tried to petition these Republican women particularly.
And they said no.
And they've said no. So I don't think you can, in all honesty, say this is all a Democrat hoax.
And not least because he committed to releasing them, didn't he?
He was the one. Yeah. I mean, it was part of his campaign.
Against the Democrats. Yeah.
And I think it's important to sort of get that in perspective, that he was saying, we need transparency. We need a different kind of government. Do you remember his first term was all about draining the swamp? That's in other words, get the corruption out, get the truth known, put sunlight on. That was his whole MO, wasn't it? It's a different type of politics. And he came in, and within 4 months of being in office, he changed his mind. And if you want to have some fun, go back and listen to J.D. Vance, now the vice president, or Kash Patel, now the head of the FBI, talking on podcast before they were elected. And there's this great line from Kash Patel where he's like, pull up your big boy pants and release the files. And you kind of think, okay, Kash, you're head of the FBI now.
Do it.
What are you going to do?
Yeah, pull up your pants.